Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Haley. For those of you who don't know me, I'm here at OMAX. I just want to introduce Nicole, who's our speaker today. She's going to be covering how to pitch a prime and offset proposals. And I want to quickly tell you about our next topic, which is the BCIP Building Canada Innovation Program. That's going to be taking place on Friday, December 2nd. So we'll send out that link to register for that webinar as well. This webinar will be recorded, and I will send out everyone online today a follow-up email with a link attached so you can share it if you'd like, along with the link and the registration for our next webinar. And we'll be answering questions at the end. So anything that doesn't get answered in the question and answer period, I'll make sure to answer in a follow-up email as well. So I think that's everything. Nicole, if you want to get started.
Okay, thanks very much, Haley. I have to say this is my first webinar of my life. So I run a technology company, but this is a first for me, so I'm kind of excited, despite the fact that I'm not expecting a lot of
Okay, I'm going to continue. So the line looks like we had one of the lines drop. This is a special situation. We threw this webinar together very last minute, literally a couple of days ago, as a lot of you will know. It's not part of our regular webinar series where we have sort of guest speakers. This is just something that's come in response to some questions that we've received from a lot of you and from various different people, more about how offsets are evolving and how offsets are becoming a bit more strategic and how companies can be involved at more strategic levels as opposed to just the traditional sourcing methods to fulfilling offset obligations. So we had an absolutely overwhelming response in such a short amount of time. I think this is the most amount of attendees you've had on a webinar. So it's really exciting. But as we started to dive into some of the topics that we can get into, we spoke to one of the consulting firms, offset consulting firms that we work with. We work with lots of them, but CFN is one of our strategic partners, and we've decided that we're going to put on another bigger, more in-depth webinar on the actual rules and regulations and how companies can receive investment from offsets and from prime contractors and how to pitch primes very specifically for each type of investment you're looking to do. So our plan is to hold that webinar early in the new year in January, and we're going to be communicating to all of you when that will be. So we'll put that in as our regular webinar series, webinar after BCIP after the holidays, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper, a lot deeper in that webinar, and the guest speaker will be CFN and maybe another company as well. We'll get those exact details shortly. So we are going to move on though, and I am going to spend some time just talking about why I'm so excited about this shift of how companies are starting to fulfill offsets and how the offset game is changing and how that's changing globally. So I am going to get into that. So first of all, I personally got into offsets through my involvement with the Global Offset and Counter Trade Association. I used to run a Canadian defense company, and we had a lot of sales internationally, but we were never able to leverage or use offsets to have companies actually source from us. From offsets. So I actually came into this from a position of some frustration because I didn't know how to access offsets as a Canadian company. But I got involved with the global offset community, and my Canadian manufacturing business was selling in different markets like Israel and different markets around the world where we were SME, but we would sell directly to the government and then have an offset obligation. So I ironically had more experience in international offsets before focusing on Canada. So I wanted to start the webinar by just sort of talking about the opportunity that exists globally in global offsets, how many offsets there are internationally. Avocent, which is a consulting firm out of Washington, has estimated well over $500 billion of outstanding offset obligations globally. But what is most interesting and exciting for me, yes, offsets are exciting to me. What is most interesting is the way these countries' policies are evolving and how they tend to focus more in on what I refer to as more strategic offset fulfillment. What I mean by that is that what we see internationally, and I am going to talk about Canada and how that's completely evolved in Canada as well, is more of a focus on trying to drive government contractors to make investments with local companies to fit them into their long-term vision, long-term product roadmap, to make investments alongside them in R&D and technology, to work alongside local, education institutes. And so what we're starting to see internationally is we're seeing a growth in the offset obligations outstanding. We're seeing lots of countries take on offsets. Since I started OMX, there's been 4 additional countries added to the list of countries that require offsets. Mexico is a recent one as well that we've just seen. So we're seeing more offset obligations outstanding. We're seeing more countries take on offset policies. We're seeing more and an ever increased focus on some of these strategic ways to fulfill offsets. And so what I mean by that is you have a local company basically pitching a prime contractor to say, we'd like to make this investment in this type of R&D or develop this technology or co-create a product with you to get into your global supply chains. And yes, we happen to be in this country where you have an offset obligation, but we understand this is a strategic direction for your corporation. So it's a bit more complicated. Okay, it's a lot more complicated, but the good news is that it isn't such a direct one-off just sourcing from a local company. So that's the global landscape. I guess this webinar might be coming a little bit later, but GOCA was in Canada recently, in Montreal in October, which was really nice for GOCA to be here in Canada. And they do conferences twice a year around the world to explain and bring people together as they work through fulfilling their global offset obligations. So we're seeing that trend globally, and it's really exciting for us at OMX. We're expanding our platform internationally. The direction that we're going as a company is that we're really focusing in on data analytics of the industrial bases around the world, particularly countries that have offset obligations, doing a lot in supply chain, and we're aggregating international sourcing opportunities and doing smart matchmaking along with those. So some of the growth areas that we've been really focused in is building OMX for countries around the world, and we actually received funding from an investment framework to do that, which was really exciting for us. And bringing more of these international specific RFPs and opportunities also to the Canadian industrial base through our online platform. So we're expanding a lot more internationally. We're focusing a lot more in managing supply chains, in setting up strategic sourcing, the ability to do strategic sourcing by understanding an industrial base and the companies that exist in that industrial base, and R&D and technology capabilities. So we're doing a lot of work more internationally and focusing more in on this concept of strategic sourcing, sourcing to drive socioeconomic impacts, and then also working with organizations like a lot of yours and government entities and education organizations to do strategic R&D and technology development. So that's the direction that we're going as an organization. And then when you look at Canada, most of you on the phone, if you've been involved in the community, will know about this shift from IRBs, which was the traditional way to fulfill offset obligations in Canada, to focusing more on ITBs, so from regional to technology. But then the real shift was in the value proposition, which is this requirement for large foreign or local government contractors, so large corporations, to make investments upfront, commit upfront and early, to direct investments and strategic partnerships with local Canadian companies towards sometimes guided market segments. So every RFP that's come up that's had a value proposition since the value proposition really started has directed these government contractors towards some of these strategic areas where they want those companies to make investments or to partner with local companies to co-develop and work together. And there's lots of ways that they can fulfill that. So it's not necessarily just through an investment framework, but there are lots of other ways, technology, transfers that can be made, and a lot of other ways, which we're going to get into those details in that next webinar where we actually dive into all of the different ways that companies can work with Canadian industry. But in terms of thinking about positioning your organization to pitch one of these large corporations, my perspective is that, of course, there are RFIs and RFPs that go out for specific parts, with drawings that you can compete on, and in that, it'll be all about having a competitive price, but with a really strong Canadian content value. So we are at OMX are getting a ton of requests, especially with the RFPs that are out on the street right now, just to encourage companies to go into OMX and update their CCV percentages, and sometimes it'll be custom CCV percentages for specific RFIs, but a lot of the time, even just to get ballpark average Canadian content values for companies in our platform. So we're really trying to be a data source to understand not only what the industrial-based capabilities are across the country that companies could engage with, but also what are the specific Canadian content values. And so if you're an SME and you might have 40% Canadian content value, our goal is to have you using OMX to also find more Canadian suppliers to increase your CCV percentage. So I would say the first way to pitch a prime, if they've got a specific part they want you to quote on, is to focus on trying to get that CCV as high as possible, also while maintaining a competitive price, which sometimes can have some friction, those two things. But that would be the first one. The second one is the topic that I find really interesting that we're talking about. I was talking about earlier, international, and we've got some opportunities in OMX now posted for various prime contractors that are looking for creative proposals and creative concepts. So concepts for R&D development, technology development, even partially commercialization. So any of this more strategic development that can be done here in Canada by most often Canadian SMEs, and I would say even better in partnership with academic institutes, and to really leverage those relationships and propose something that not only would be good for your organization and would be good for any organizations involved in your potential consortium and for Canada, but I would say also something that could be a win-win and also be strategic for that prime contractor. So would fit into their long-term product roadmap and their long-term technology development. So that's where you can get a win-win. And then for the value propositions that you can find that are public, sometimes you have to be a qualified bidder to see them. I would focus in on what those market segments are in those RFPs. So what areas of interest is the government giving those bidders extra points for in the value proposition evaluation? So we have seen such a wide range of topics in this regard. So we've seen more points for skills development. Can you propose something where a prime contractor invests in your organization, which will help other suppliers develop their skills, or they can make an investment in your organization to help you develop your skills or help you develop yourself as a supplier. So skills development is more focused on people, and supplier development obviously on the SME. We've seen a lot around exports. So is there an area where a prime contractor could work with you to help bring you through their global supply chain or help you export around the world? Exports are huge. R&D is also huge. Same thing, there could be a proposal where you say, this is the R&D that we could really use some funding for, some support for, even some IP transfer or knowledge assistance. We can't develop this R&D without knowing what this particular prime contractor might have or want or need or be able to integrate with their own products. So lots of different various R&D projects that could be proposed as well. It will all depend on what your particular organization's capabilities are. And then it gets interesting in terms of how primes can actually fulfill their offset obligations through various different means. My position is, if you're an SME, when I was an SME trying to go after this stuff, it didn't really matter to me so much how the prime got their credits. It was more about understanding more their strategic direction and where they're going as an organization in the next 5-10 years and how you can support that. So it's sort of a very traditional value proposition in any business that you're pitching to somebody to say, this is how I'm going to make your business more efficient or win you more market share, that sort of thing. So I believe they're very, very closely linked. And one of the really interesting side effects we're seeing of some of these shifts in policies, which have been really positive in my view, in Canada and globally, is we're starting to see offset professionals take a seat at the strategy table of these organizations. So, I know of some of the largest defense contractors that are bringing offset professionals right onto their board or right into their C-level, C-suite, senior discussions about where are we going as an organization, because that is where that'll be best use of any R&D funds or other outside funding besides just sourcing parts, and then leverage it and use offsets for it and use that as a competitive advantage to win a contract in a country as well as taking us there. So there's really these win-win scenarios that I think can be very beneficial for a prime contractor and also obviously for the recipient of any obligation. So those are some of the thoughts that I have on offsets as a strategic driver. And if you're an SME or you're an academic institute or you're a nonprofit or you're a larger company with a lot of Canadian content, I think there's a lot of different creative ways and things that you can be pitching to a lot of these different bidders that could be, it's got to come back down to the win-win for both parties. But that's what we've seen companies are looking for. They're looking for solutions that get them high Canadian content, that help them achieve more points in the value proposition, which means committing to some of those market segments and really focusing on the R&D and exports and supplier development angles, and then also obviously helping them in the long term achieve their goals as well. So I'm going to switch over to Q&A here in a minute, and hopefully there's been some questions that have come through. Let's just take a look at the questions, and then before I forget, I'm just going to put something here on the screen to remind everyone. I know that Toronto is not the epicenter of the defense community, but if you can make it or happen to be in Toronto, we'd love to have you. Friday, December 16th from 3 to 7, we're having some people here at our office. We have a new office below our existing office, so we're going to be having a Christmas party. And yes, that is Burger the hot dog on that Christmas invitation. So he's now famous, Haley's dog, which I think is you have to have if you have a startup. So if you can make that event, that'd be great. And so let's just see some of these questions that are coming through. So we've just got one. So specifically, what would we say prime contractors are looking for? So I think just going back to, we're seeing a lot of prioritization around small businesses. We're seeing a lot of, obviously, regional balancing. So some regions, depending on if it's a shipbuilding opportunity or aerospace, or it kind of tends to depend on what type of platform is being proposed. But I think the regional piece can be difficult for some companies. They've got a strong presence in one province, really filling that out across the country. So obviously being spread across the country, they're prioritizing small businesses, depending on what the market segments are identified in the RFP. Those are always a huge focus. And then trying to get some extra points in the areas supplier development, R&D, and exports. And then I think just going back to this concept of taking a long-term strategy with the prime contractor and really looking at where they want to go as a company is key.
Where can we find?
Okay, so we have another question here. Let's just scroll up. Where can we find a calculation matrix to sum up the offset points for an SME for a specific tender? This would be practical for pitching to a prime. The problem is the way these points are laid out is they are in every different RFP, and they are different in every RFP. Some of the more recent RFPs that we've seen come out are not open to everyone. They're only open to the qualified bidders. So the companies, CSC for instance, only the people that are part of the qualified bidders list can actually see these RFPs. unless you're under NDA with them and you're working with them in some other capacity, it's not public knowledge to see how these points lay out. So the exact points that a prime is going to get in a bid evaluation for certain parts of the value proposition, as far as I understand, they're not public on some of the current RFPs. There might be some old ones that I'm not aware of that you could just download off Buy and Sell and see how they lay out. But I will tell you that we've seen pretty much every single RFP in the last 2 years, and they are so different. The points are really, really different. So we're seeing a long, just a wide range of stuff, but the themes are always the same. So it's always extra points for R&D. It's always extra points for exports. It's always extra points for committing up front versus just identifying companies you'll work with, for committing to more than just the 30% ITB. And then in terms of knowing how many actual offset credits you could be helping a prime get, that's all public. That's on ISED's website. So you can go on the Industry Canada website and look up how the multipliers work for consortium, for investment framework, for some of these areas where you could propose something enticing that will get them an actual multiplier against their ITB obligation. So here's a question here: is there such thing as a multiplier in a value proposition? That is a really, really good question, because as far as we understand it, the multipliers that help the prime achieve their ITB obligation are not necessarily counted in the value proposition. So the value proposition can be very different. Sometimes the value proposition is, what is your total percentage spend in this area going to be? What percentage of your total contract value are you committing to in R&D? We've seen many times. So that's a really good question, and whoever asked that clearly has a good understanding of the ITB policy. But we haven't seen the multipliers for ITB credits applying under the value proposition evaluation.
Surge me. This is the other question.
How do you avoid a situation where you almost completed a deal with a prime only for an opportunity to be presented where a higher multiplier offset is presented and they go with another SME? Yeah, I think it comes down to communicating a lot. So I think it's important to talk to the prime about how you can help them maximize their ITB fulfillment, how you can help them maximize points and value proposition. If you're a similar company to another company and you're saying that your competitor beat you out last minute because they offered more points, I think you have to keep that communication open with the prime in terms of understanding what their evaluation criteria is and how much they're going to put towards a value proposition. So in a lot of cases, we've seen primes, or we've seen suppliers respond by saying, here's my price if you don't care that my CCV is 70%. Here's my price if it must be 100. And here is my third price if it has to be 150%. Sometimes primes will ask for more than 100% ITB from their major tier 1 providers. So I think it's key to just say, this is basically what it's going to cost you to get these extra points. So do you just want the parts, or do you want maximum points and value proper, maximum ITB credits? So again, I hate that it always depends, but how do you avoid that situation? I would just say that try to get a good understanding from the prime contractor ahead of time what the evaluation criteria will be for them to pick you over another company, and hopefully they're open with that as much as possible.
I think that's all the ones that are asked right now.
Okay, so that's all the questions. So I guess we have 3 minutes left, so final call for any questions. Otherwise, you know how to reach Haley and I at any time, so please reach out. And it looks like I just successfully completed my first webinar. Wow. Yeah.
We'll just put this here one more time.
Yeah, one more time with Burger the hot dog. So thanks everyone for joining. It was a lot of fun for me. Hopefully it was fun for you. And please reach out to us with anything else. And otherwise, hope to see you at the BCIP webinar coming up in
Next Friday.
Next Friday. Thank you. Thanks very much. Goodbye.